Hey guys, my name is MrWalla, and this is going to be my first ever build guide on my Orbistorm's Stormbrand Elementalist. This build was actually my league starter for the Metamorph League, and has taken me through pretty much all the content the new Atlas update has to offer, including max level Awakener. I decided to go Stormbrand because I thought it would be very good for Metamorphs, and it is. It feels very safe. You place your brands down, you activate the Metamorph, and then you can run for your life. You only really have to go back into range to reattach brands, and you can pretty much keep your distance the whole time. Alongside being able to take on bosses and Metamorphs, this build also has pretty fast and satisfying map clear. The basic idea of this build is to use Orbistorms and Brand Recall at the same time when clearing. Since Brand Recall has an instant cast time, you're able to do this in one animation. When I'm not clearing and I'm killing bosses, I swap in a few support gems to give my Orbistorms Culling Strike and Power Charge on crit, turning into a pretty nice utility skill. I'm really excited to bring you guys this guide since I've been really enjoying this build over the past 2 weeks, so let's get started. Timestamps will be included in the description below. For the gear in this build, it's not too costly to get started. This was my league starter, so I started from nothing and slowly worked my way up to the gear I have now currently, and honestly it felt solid throughout the whole progression. Obviously, you won't be able to march into Awakener and expect to kill him with super budget gear, but I do think that the build will still feel comfortable on a budget as you farm and upgrade your gear. For weapons, I chose to use 2 rare scepters, but you could also use wands or spell daggers, as for this build they're going to work pretty similarly. Here's a list of some good mods to try to get on your weapons in any combination. Keep in mind that the more that you get in combination, the more expensive the item's going to be. Critical strike chance for spells, lightning damage to spells, global critical strike multiplier, spell damage, cast speed, lightning or elemental damage penetration, and +1 to level of all lightning spell skills. And this one is super huge because it gives both our Orbistorms and our Stormbrand an additional level. Alternatively, you can swap in one of your weapons for a shield if you want to. This will give you access to another life roll, some elemental resistances, and you can use shield charge. It's good to note here that spell crit should be a pretty big priority, as this is some of the biggest crit you can get on any of your gear. While I don't think it's the end of the world if you have to use increased crit strikes on your Stormbrand, getting enough crit to be able to drop it and use another damage support is huge. In my first weapon, the gems I have socketed are Flame Dash, Faster Casting, and level 7 Arcane Surge. We don't want Arcane Surge to be any higher than level 7 since we want to proc Surge with only one cast of Flame Dash. In my other hand, I have Lightning Golem, Brand Recall, and level 3 Empower. Do keep in mind though that Empower is more of a luxury than anything. While having the extra cooldown reduction that it gives to Brand Recall is very nice, it should be one of the last things you invest into when acquiring gear. For our chest piece, I highly recommend Impulse's Broken Heart. This item gives us a nice damage boost whenever we shock an enemy, and makes it so that whenever we kill a shocked enemy, they explode for 5% of their maximum life as lightning damage. This will greatly boost our clear speed as well as our damage, and as an added bonus, the lightning explosions that you get from killing a shocked enemy are very satisfying. If you can't get your hands on an Impulses, it's okay. You can either use a Carcass Jack or a rare chest with high life and elemental resists. Those should do just fine in the meantime, but I do highly recommend you get one as soon as possible, as it is huge for your clear speed and huge for the build in general. The 6 link setup I used in my chest piece is Stormbrand, Concentrated Effect, Controlled Destruction, Hypothermia, Lightning Penetration, and for the last link, I use Inspiration, but Increased Crits is also good if you can't get enough crit elsewhere. Although I haven't tried them yet, if you really want to push your damage, the new Awaken added Lightning and Awaken Lightning Penetration would be huge for our damage. Although these two are pretty expensive, going for 5x and 1x respectively on Softcore Trade League at the time of recording this video, I still think they would be pretty good investments if you're looking to push your damage. For the helm, this is one of my favorite parts of the build, as we get to use the Tempest Binding. This is a fantastic item to socket Orbistorms into, since it gives us 2 free links, Innervate and Ice Bite. Innervate gives us a flat lightning damage buff to our spells whenever we kill with Orbistorms, and Ice Bite helps us generate frenzy charges, boosting our cast speed as well as Stormbrand's activation frequency. Similar to the Impulses, if you can't get a Tempest Binding, you'll just want a rare helm with high life and elemental resists. The links that I'm using in my helm are Orbistorms, Chain Support, Controlled Destruction, and Increased Critical Damage support. For bigger single targets like Conquerors or Awakener, I swap in Chain, Controlled Destruction, and Crit Damage for Culling Strike, Increased Crits, and Power Charge on crit. For one of our rings, I recommend a Curse on Hit Assassin's Mark ring. This will give a huge boost to our crit chance, with both base crit and power charge generation, as well as give us some life and mana on kill. The difference between the two tiers of this Shaper mod are not really noticeable, so I wouldn't really worry about it with which one you get. Either level 8 or level 12 Assassin's Mark will work fine. Keep in mind that these Assassin's Mark rings can get pretty expensive if you get more useful mods with it, so I recommend just finding one with a good base and an open prefix for crafted life. Alternatively, if you can't get an Assassin's Mark ring, you can link your Herald of Thunder with Curse on Hit Assassin's Mark, though this will be more inconsistent. For the second ring slot, I just went with life and dex along with any elemental resist that I needed to help me get capped. For this build, you'll need a minimum of 111 dex for level 20 green gems, and a really easy place to get attributes are in rings. Another easy way to get attributes is in the base that you use for your amulet. Using either a citrine or an onyx amulet is a really good idea to make up for the lack of strength and dex we don't have in our skill tree. As for mods on the amulet, here's a list of some good damage mods to look for. Increased spell damage, crit multi, increased lightning damage, cast speed, and lightning and elemental penetration. Along with damage mods, you can also look for a high life roll, any attributes you still need, and any elemental resist you still need to get capped. If you're willing to spend a little more on your amulet, you can look for +1 to level of all lightning skill gems, or +1 to level of all intelligence skill gems, which are mods from 2 of the 4 new influence types, Crusader and Hunter. The anointment that I'm currently using on my amulet is Shaman's Dominion, which gives us crit multi and crit chance for our brands, and saves us a couple of travel points. Although this does require silver oil, for cheaper options, something like Heartseeker or Divine Judgment or Primal Manifestation would also be good. For your gloves, I recommend just getting a high life roll with any elemental resist or attributes that you still need. One good mod though, if you can get it, is the increased damage with hits against chilled enemies and cold resist hybrid incursion mod. For the links on my gloves, I have a cast 1 damage taken steel skin setup. Level 11 steel skin, level 2 cast 1 damage taken, increased duration, and then I have Val Righteous Fire in the 4th link. A huge warning though when you're using Val Righteous Fire in these sockets, we're only using Val Righteous Fire and not regular Righteous Fire. That means the gem should only be supported by increased duration and not cast 1 damage taken, though you still need them in the links. In order to do this, you need to make sure that the level required on the Righteous Fire gem is higher than the level required for your cast 1 damage taken before you socket the Val Righteous Fire. If the required level is lower, your cast 1 damage taken will trigger the regular Righteous Fire, leaving you in an unfortunate situation. For the boots, I recommend just a rare pair of boots with 25 to 30% movement speed, a nice life roll, and then any elemental resist you still need. For the enchant on your boots, you have a few options. Damage pen if you haven't killed recently, mana regen if you've cast a spell recently, 10% movement speed if you haven't been hit recently, flat lightning if you haven't killed recently, and then 16% increased attack and cast speed if you've killed recently. These will all be good options. For the sockets in my boots, I use Enlighten, Zealotry, Herald of Thunder, and Herald of Ice. I want to note that before I had Enlighten, I didn't use Herald of Ice, as when I use Herald of Ice, Herald of Thunder, and Zealotry without Enlighten, it's kind of tight on the mana, and I really couldn't comfortably cast my spells. So if you don't have an Enlighten, and you're struggling with mana, you might want to consider taking off Herald of Ice until you get an Enlighten. For the belt slot, I chose a rare Stygian Vice with high life and resists. You can also look for some damage mods on your belt, like delve mods such as lightning damage and elemental damage. For jewels, I'm currently using 4. 3 that I get in my tree, and then the 1 abyssal jewel slot that I get from my Stygian Vice. For most builds, you want to wait to give yourself Onslaught. Onslaught grants us 20% attack, cast, and movement speed. For this build, the way we do this is getting an abyssal jewel with life and the chance to gain Onslaught on kill for 4 seconds. For the rest of our jewels, both abyssal and normal jewels will work fine. I try to prioritize life on all my jewels, and then I try to get 1 or 2 damage mods. However, if you don't think you need the life, feel free to just use jewels for damage. For normal jewels, here are some mods that you'll want to look for. And here are some good mods to look for in abyssal jewels. For our flask setup, I recommend a Seething Divine Flask of Staunching, an Alchemist Quicksilver Flask of Adrenaline, getting a 30% roll if possible, an Experimenter's Diamond Flask of Warding, an Experimenter's Quartz Flask of Heat, and finally a Wise Oak. For Wise Oak, the ideal setup is to balance all 3 uncapped elemental resistances for damage reduction in each element as well as lightning penetration. Remember that uncapped resistances is the number in parentheses on the right. If you aren't able to balance all 3 resistances, you need to at least get your uncapped lightning resist to the highest or tied for the highest, as we do mostly lightning damage and want lightning penetration. If you still can't manage to do this, you are better off using another defensive flask instead. For my Ascendancy points, I first took Pendulum Destruction for the AoE and damage into Mastermind of Discord for the huge lightning penetration we get for using Herald of Thunder, as well as reduced mana reservation of our Herald skills. I then take Paragon of Calamity. This makes us immune to Elemental Reflect, as well as giving us some life leech with our elemental damage and some situational damage and damage reduction. And finally, for our Uber Lab, we take Shaper of Desolation. This guarantees that our damage applies one of the 3 elemental ailments, changing between each ailment and even all 3 every couple seconds. For Bandits, I help the Lyra. For my Pantheons, I use Soul of Lunaris and Soul of Shikari. For leveling, I leveled with Freeze Pulse and Frostbomb. Then at level 12, I picked up an Arc and Stormbrand, where I leveled with those all the way to Blood Aqueducts. As for the gear for leveling, I recommend using 2 Axiom Perpetuums, other standard leveling gear like Tabula, and a nice pair of fossil crafted leveling gloves. You can get a pair of these by buying some low item level gloves from Tarklay in Act 1, then using a metallic and a frigid fossil and a 2-socket resonator on them. These gloves give us a huge amount of flat damage for leveling, and we can use them starting at level 1. So for our skill tree, I'm going to link the Path of Building pastebin down in the description, which will have my current skill tree as well as my gear. But I did want to mention something that I highly recommend you do, which is level with Elemental Overload. This means you will skip any big crit nodes in the tree until around level 70, which is where I respec out of EO and switch to crit. And that's going to be it for this guide. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. I know that I had a blast making it. If you have any questions about the build or PoE in general, you can always come by my stream at twitch.tv/MrWalla. Thanks for watching and have a fantastic day.